hello, Bob. It has been a minute. How are you, my friend?
Well, I got carried away. I should have started sooner to figure this out, but I didn't think it would be this big of a problem. But yeah, I just got finished planting my first sweet corn of the year
Nice.
in a very nice soil. We're talking about soil.
So, where are you at? Are you up in Oregon?
Yeah, I'm in the Coast Range near McMinnville, Oregon.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And I hear you've been traveling a bit lately.
Yeah, I've had a few trips around everywhere from Costa Rica to New Zealand to Samoa to Edmonton, Canada. Yeah.
Yeah, that's traveling. So, not to just dive right in, but something I've been working on for, I think I mean, you were the one that sent me those Lenodite spents about, must be 3 years ago now. But I've been playing around with them and getting some really interesting results. And so, just for the audience, I would love you to tell the story of what sent you down this path to begin with, which was when you were, I believe, farming back east.
Well, yeah. I mean, I started out. I got interested in biodynamics, and so biodynamics is about humus, and we didn't know much then, but there was a lot of information about biodynamics, making biodynamic compost, and that's fine if you have cattle or sheep or some animal wastes in order to make biodynamic compost. And of course, biodynamics was developed in Switzerland and based on a lecture given by Rudolf Steiner, and back in the 20s in Basel, Switzerland, a famous workshop he gave on biodynamics. And biodynamics, the main precept of biodynamics is making compost and using specific microorganisms known as biodynamic preparations. And I went to a University of Delaware College of Agriculture, and towards my end of that period, I took over the family farm, which was about an hour away from University of Delaware. And I was interested in biodynamics. Matter of fact, I was disgusted by then with, ag school, because they're just pushing chemicals and they're obviously supported by the petrochemical industry. And in Delaware, DuPont was king. And so they had a slant. I was interested in organics, biocontrol, ecology. Well, you didn't get much of that. So I took over the family farm for a while and learned biodynamics. And of course, we had livestock. We have cattle, sheep, even a few pigs, and making compost. Okay. It's very effective. But at the time, we knew nothing. We knew nothing compared to what we know now. Well, what you do when you make compost is you create humic substances. You're creating humic acids. And it's not that straightforward. It takes specific microorganisms, management of that compost, turning it, aeration, temperatures. It's an art making compost. I was already interested in making compost because I grew up in where I lived was also the mushroom capital of the world. So there was hundreds of mushroom farms, and making compost is crucial to mushroom farm. Is how they grow mushrooms. You use chicken manure, cow manure. No, you don't use cow manure. You use chicken manure, maybe horse manure, straw, maybe hay. We used to sell hay that got rained on to the big compost companies that made mushroom compost. So I was interested in composting, but I didn't know I was making humic acids. And so I've been going down this path for well over 60 years. really get down to the nitty gritty. And it really all boils down to humic acids, or what now we call humic substances. We don't even call it humic acid, humic substances, because there's 800 different substances within humic substances or humic acids. It's very complex. It's come a long way. So when I moved west, and I was a consultant, and I worked with seed industry and seed potato production in Montana, as an entomologist, pest control advisor, and all that. I didn't know that much about soil management yet, other than biodynamics. Okay. But when you're working with those kind of crops in those areas, or even here in Oregon, no, people don't have manure. They're not raising livestock. It's like they have a monoculture. They're going to raise potatoes, or they're going to raise grass seed or orchard crop or something like that. And that includes California. So they generally didn't have a traditional mixed farming approach like we had in Pennsylvania as Pennsylvania Dutch culture that was brought over from Europe, and it always included livestock. My grandfather had dairy, he had pigs, he had chickens, and you composted that, you grew your own feed, and you kept that cycle going. Okay, so now we talk about what's sustainable, what's sustainability. Well, go back to Myerstown, Pennsylvania, where my ancestors ended up in 1733, and you will still see successful farming based on that model, which is livestock, composting manure or spreading manure, sheet composting, whatever. But it always included livestock. And then cash crops, feed crops, cover crops, because you needed hay for livestock, like alfalfa, clover, and that's a nitrogen fixer. So you'd have a rotation. You'd put, and you'd have a clover crop, an alfalfa crop, and that'd be fed to livestock. You collect the manure, and then you'd use compost, and then you'd plow up the alfalfa, and you plant corn for a couple of years, and then soybeans, and then barley, a regular rotation. And it's still very, very sustainable to this very, very same day, except most of the country does not use a mixed farming system. That's all changed. It's not small dairies like that anymore. It's dairies with 10,000 cows and a lake full of shit. Okay. And it just becomes a disposal problem. So it's a totally different system. So it's a system that does not get an organic matter addition. There's no cover crop. There's no crop rotation to speak of. It's just chemical fertilizer. And that's it. So no thought of humic acid, no knowledge of humic acid. It's just you plant a crop until to it's not economically feasible anymore. And then you go to town and get a job and sell the land. Or you move farther west. Well, we're on the West Coast. That's as far west as you're going to be moving. So what's the problem? So people would have problems. Oh, what's happening to my yield? When I first came here, we would get 400 sack potatoes or 450 sack potatoes. Now we're down to 200. Like, what's wrong? And I bought a piece of burned out ground in Montana, and it was pathetic, So I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. How can we turn this around? Phosphate availability was low, but adding phosphate didn't help much. So then I saw an ad in the Montana Farmer Stockman magazine. And again, we didn't have manure. I did have sheep flock, and I did have enough manure to make compost for my garden. But the people I worked with, they were growing hundreds of acres of potatoes for seed and other stuff. And so, their ground never saw a drop of manure, which is basically how it is around here in Willamette Valley too. So the yields go down. What goes on here? So I saw a little ad, and it was for clodbuster humate. I didn't know what humate was. They never discussed that in college or anything. What's humate? I don't know. It's a mineral that's mined. It's an ancient fossil compost is the easiest way to say it. It's when New Mexico was a sea bottom and like a shallow swamp, let's say, and then you have the uplift of the Rocky Mountains pushing that deposit up to the continental divide after it got covered with 20 feet of sandstone. And then these deposits of black material were exposed, and then they were utilized by the Native Americans, to grow corn. And then later on, people traveling through the area, settlers, and specifically people going to Utah and passing through that area, Mormons, the story is, okay, that they were camping near that site in northwest New Mexico, and their mules and horses started eating this black stuff. Okay, that's the story. So then they learned that this stuff really increased crop yield. And so they'd haul it to Utah and use it. But, they didn't know what it was. And so anyway, I got a little 1 ounce sample in the mail. And I took some of my soil, I put it in little pots in my little greenhouse, and I had some untreated and I had treated. I didn't know how much to use. I just used a pinch in a 4-inch pot and planted a sweet corn seeds. Okay, the difference was night and day on the corn. I mean, it was 3 or 4 inches taller right away. You can see a difference right away. And I said, well, this stuff works. Okay. I'm gonna take this one step farther and put it on people's potato crops. And the same thing happened. The crop was thicker, greener, taller. Oh my God. But the most important part to me, because I was involved in pest management, entomology, control of insects, and where we used this humate, there wasn't any insect damage right to the row of where we didn't use it. And the next row over from where we didn't use humate, there was tremendous amount of leaf damage, defoliation, lacy looking, insect feeding. And I thought we discovered this is a breakthrough, because my whole focus at that time was to provide alternatives to toxic technology to get away from these pesticides. This is back in Silent Spring when Rachel Carson was talking about the hazards of pesticide use and the damage to the environment. And I'm really an environmentalist. I love the forest. I love nature. I would have been a park ranger. I was a park ranger, in fact, in the National Park Service. I was a naturalist in the summer, right? And that was terrible because it was working for the government. And I've learned that's not ever a good idea. And in any event, that's where I was coming from philosophically. So when I saw the lack of insect feeding damage, where I put this so-called humate, I didn't know what it was exactly. I knew it was some kind of organic matter. We didn't know about the word humic acid. Even the people that sold it didn't know the details, right? And so that was back in 1972 or something like that, 73. It's a long time ago. Okay. So I've been working on that ever since. And now we know why there wasn't any insect damage. We know what that stuff is, why it works, what the components are. There's 800 different chemical compounds. Okay, so at the time I was using it, the results were clear. We'd get maybe 25% higher yield on potatoes and maybe about the same on grain or corn or whatever, But the establishment, which is one of the things that made me hate the establishment, and the university extension people, oh, that can't work. That's just a source of organic matter. And you're only putting 200 pounds an acre out. That's not enough to do anything. That's just snake oil. That's can't work. That's impossible because it's not enough NPK in it. It doesn't have doesn't have enough organic. Yeah, we think organic matter is good for the soil, but there's not enough in that stuff to do any good. But the thing of it is, my experimentation, which is the basis of the scientific method, is experimentation and observation, told me it did work. And I wasn't going to listen to those people, and I would take the abuse. Okay, call it snake oil if you like. But I had plenty of people that it saved their farm. Yeah, and they thanked me for it. Thank you for saving my farm. Okay. So all those years passed, and I got deeper and deeper into it, and I developed products like Humifos, where we mixed rock phosphate, mined in Montana, with the humic acids, and the availability was increased right in the bag. And so we did research with as an alternative to chemical phosphate. And what we found out was in most soils, you didn't need the phosphate, just this humate. And you'd get an increase in phosphate availability every time. And these people had been using so much phosphate for so long, they had a lot of it in the soil was tied up. And I found out, well, there's no point in using phosphate, just the humate alone increases the availability. And again, we didn't know chemically, we didn't know what was exactly going on. So the difference between then and now is molecular biochemistry, DNA, genetic or molecular pathways, spectroscope analysis, and a high level biochemistry understanding that we didn't have then. So, in other words, the science that I had learned in several universities that I attended, did not cover this area. This is new science. It was new science. There wasn't any way. They'd always analyze these humates and for NPK, so, well, it doesn't have enough NPK to do anything. Because we were, I guess, in a primitive stage in a way, but since then, and being a member of the International Humic Substance Society, traveling all over the world, talking to scientists from all over the place, I learned and I kept up on the research, and we found out what was really going on with this humate, which is also called leonardite, lignite, humate. There's a lot of names. And then over the years, we learned how to tell the difference between different deposits, whether they were any good or not. Of course, I'd already figured that out just using sweet corn seed and just doing tests in a greenhouse. That was my method because I didn't have any high-tech method. All I knew is what the plants told me, which worked and which didn't. And now we've taken it to the point where we use Fourier transform spectrophotometry, which is spectroscope analysis. So it gives you like a dot on a pie chart, and each dot is a chemical compound within a specific functional group: polyphenols, carboxyl groups, quinones. This is high-level biochemistry, okay? And unless you know about biochemistry or organic chemistry, it kind of doesn't mean a lot to most people. But we found out by using corn seed and correlating it with all those fancy analysis of spectroscope and functional groups, that specific functional groups within the humate what made the difference. And they were called aromatic groups. So the degree of aromacicity. Okay. And so then it got deeper as science evolved. And now we know something about, activating pathways. That turn things on in the cell. This whole thing is nothing but a cellular process.
It's all about the biology.
It doesn't matter what cell. Doesn't matter whether it's an animal, a plant,
Yep.
a microbe. humic substances are the key to life on Earth. And some of my early mentors used to say, and they didn't know why it worked, but they were saying it's the difference between the Earth and the moon. It's the living bridge between the dead soil and the living plant root, things like that. Now, we didn't know that some humates have something called polyphenols. Now, you know what polyphenols are. They're antioxidants. They're good for your health, like grape skin, like blackberry, things like that. They have, a high polyphenol content. It's good. Like a little red wine, it's good. Boy, it's antioxidant effect, yeah, polyphenols. Okay. So I met up with some German researchers from it's called Humboldt University of Berlin. And it's a high-end university for sure, and in Berlin, Germany. And I met people at Northwest University at a conference we had on humic substances. It was called the Humic Substances Working Group. And this is in Boston at Northwest University. So I met these German researchers, and they were quite young. They had an older professor, Dr. Steinberg, and his grad student, Dr. Saul, woman, Nadine Saul. And they had taken my product because I'd give them samples of our fulvic acid to take back to Berlin. And I'd also working with the hydroponic and greenhouse specialists in Berlin at the Humboldt University. And they used our fulvic acid in research on hydroponics in greenhouses on a number, and papers were published. Okay. The results are fantastic. Okay. Then came Dr. Steinberg and Nadine Saul that I met in Boston. They took my samples and she said to me, well, do you want us to do the molecular genetics on this? Molecular biology? And I said, well, yeah, I don't know much about that, but yeah, go for it. So a series of research and papers were published. So it turns out that there's specific polyphenols that activated specific named pathways. Yeah. So it activated a pathway that turns on resistance to pathogens within this plant cell. In other words, the plant is doing its own defense. It doesn't need our rescue chemistry, our pesticides to rescue it all the time. In hydroponics, you're rescuing all the time because the plant is lacking these organic compounds, the polyphenols. Then we found out it's more than just polyphenols, it's specific tannins. Tannin is a big group. It's not just tannin, it's tannins, and there's hundreds of tannins, right? And like you talk about an oak tree, oak bark, that's where they used to get tannins, which they're used to make leather, right? So tannins are that gold sort of brownish color stuff, like tea, Matter of fact, tea is tannins. That's what gives it the color. So specific tannins activated the MAP25 pathway that turns on resistance to pathogens. Okay, it activates another pathway, genetic or molecular pathway, that turns on the production of biostimulants within the cell. So the plant doesn't need our help, like spraying biopesticides or spraying, something like kelp or biostimulants or spraying pesticides or something like that. It doesn't need our help. All it needs is humic substances. These plants have been around for millions of years and in an environment rich in humic substances. And that's why, when they started moving west, they'd cut down oak forests like Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, whatever here, and they'd grow corn and be a wonderful crop. They had great crops until they didn't. Then they move west again, right? So the whole thing boils down to hardwood trees, decomposition, leaves, tannins, microbes. Okay. Now, we knew the chemistry about tannins and microbes and all this. I mean, we didn't know about microbes. Okay, but we knew that humic substances. Fulvic, olvic, olmic is a series of organic acids. So fulvic acid is the biologically active, and it's absorbed through the leaves, through the roots, and it activates those pathways. It's a golden color. It's a brownish, light brown, tan, golden color, high in polyphenol, high in tannins. Okay, so that's what turns on the plant cell and human cells. And then we got involved with the Dutch government, and they were looking to get rid of antibiotics and hormones in livestock feed because it's polluting their water. So they did a series of research that they sponsored. I paid for, I think, half of it. And we did work on dairy cows and pigs, feeding what we now call full humics, which is a soluble, dry humic acid product that I developed where we would solubilize an insoluble as mined leonardite and turn it into a soluble in a one-step process, not making a liquid, not drying it, on a one-step process. So that went into trials on livestock. And yeah, they got 14% better feed conversion. It worked better than the antibiotic control group. It made money because they got better feed conversion, quicker growth, and all that. And in the case of the dairy cows, they got more milk, more milk production, higher protein, higher butter fat, and the Dutch like that. Okay. So what we have here is something that's required for all living organisms to be healthy. Yeah, you can grow stuff with hydroponics, but then you're playing rescue chemistry. And I don't mean just hydroponics. I mean the way they do field crops nowadays.
Exactly. It's the same thing.
Nothing but chemical fertilizer, salt fertilizer. Okay. It's chemical salts, ammonium nitrate, ammonium sulfate, potassium phosphate, blah, blah, blah. It's the same stuff used in hydroponics. Okay, it's totally dead. It's just salts, chemical salts. Okay, so gigantic missing link, which is why you kind of constantly spraying and worrying about insects and we got to keep people like from going in here because they might. So then we and I developed a lot of these products in Hawaii. Because they have terrific pest problems, disease problems in Hawaii. And we found out, and this is before I knew the mechanisms, but we knew that it seemed to protect plants against insects and diseases. Now we know why. Okay, so then we started using it in hydroponics and other things, organic gardens, and people would tell me, hey, Bob, we don't have to use any pesticides anymore. We don't have any problems anymore. Like, what's going on? And then it got really, really popular in the cannabis world, in hydroponics, because you can see an obvious difference, in a couple days, 2 or 3 days. Now, the fulvic acid is the acid soluble fraction of humic acids with an S. So this is removed or extracted by a biological process from leonardite, which is a oxidized lignite coal. You can get the same thing out of earthworm compost, good biodynamic compost. You can create your own humic acid. You can create your own fulvic acid, but it's not easy. And the people that we work with don't happen to have a herd of cattle or have a manure source. Or and I work with some huge organic farmers in Southern California, like organic grapes and things, and they have hundreds of acres. Well, they didn't have compost. They tried compost tea. It just wasn't practical. Hauling all that material is incredible expense, applying it and everything. So we found out that you could use just plain old leonardite at 200 to 400 pounds an acre, and you get better results, and so a lot of people started using the raw humate. And then in Hawaii, I developed the process to make a soluble solubilize the stuff. Then that's a 10x benefit. See, so then instead of using 200 pounds, we're getting incredible results with 20 pounds, right? Because we activated those humic substances and made them soluble. Okay, so that's humic substances. Okay, the fulvic acid directly, immediately affects the plant, root growth, root development, and all that. Okay, did we know exactly why? You know, and then the humic acids feeds the soil microbes. See, then we got deeper and deeper and deeper into this and found out that if you inoculate the plant root with mycorrhizal fungi generate humic acids. Yeah, but you have to prime the pump. It's the story about whether you have bacterial or fungal dominance in the soil. The soil is old, it's been farmed a lot, it gets compacted. It's bacterial dominant because it's the fungal mycelia that cause structuring, for a crumb structure. They produce enzymes that release phosphate. They have a protective effect because they make antibiotics. They protect the root. That's what mycorrhizal fungi does. It was developed here in Oregon at Oregon State University as a biocontrol to protect roots from root rot. It releases enzymes that release phosphate. It has other effects on the plant, and it's stimulated by, in other words, you have to convert the soil to fungal dominance. And what does that? Humic substances. And I demonstrated that. I proved it. I wrote a paper on it. Matter of fact, I'm doing testing now, even at a much more advanced level, where we're using DNA testing of the soil, and it accesses a database of 24 million microorganisms. So now we can take a look at the soil and see what we've got, and we can put stuff on the soil and see what we get and how it changes things. So now we know what groups of microorganisms provide the protection against diseases and insects, and ones that produce biostimulants, ones that cause disease, ones that resist the ones that cause disease. See, so this went from something very simple, like in 72, where you plant some corn seeds in dirt and put a pinch of this humate, whatever this is. It's taken me to where we are now, which is very high level science. Mm-hmm. And so now we know how it works, what it does. And now the next step is, what does it do to microorganisms? Big time, man, big time. It converts the soil rapidly within 60 days. We used to always notice this. Well, back in the 70s and 80s, we'd put 200 pounds, 400 pounds per acre raw humate. And then at the end of we'd monitor with leaf analysis of phosphate and all the nutrients. And we'd see an increase of phosphate every time. And usually after 1 year, the soil structure was nice and loamy. The farmer would say, I haven't seen earthworms for years. Now I'm seeing earthworms. You know, and the crop would have a nice blue-green sheen to it. You know, it just looked different. The yields were fantastic. I mean, we got like record yields. So, like I say, I circle back to biodynamics. Okay, so biodynamics kind of knew. I mean, that there's reality in biodynamics, but science hadn't caught up with it. And it turns out, and I've learned recently, that Steiner was like a friend and sort of with Goethe, Wolfgang von Goethe, who was he was like the Shakespeare of German literature. He wrote the most epic poem or opera, Faust.
Go figure.
Yeah, Goethe wrote Faust. It's 2 volumes, huge. You know, like, and of course it's it's in Germany, Switzerland, Austria. They're going to do Faust every summer, the opera Faust, not Shakespeare. It's not going to be like Ashland, Oregon, where they do Shakespeare. So they do Faust. Okay. So where does this all go? Okay. It goes back to the Vedas. So Goethe, who was a genius as far as nature and in so many fields, the guy was like an incredible genius, and he stimulated Steiner. But Goethe was a scholar, and he read the Vedas, which are written in Sanskrit, and they go back thousands of years to India. And it turns out that the Vedas describe biodynamics in detail. And the whole idea of biodynamics came from the Indian Vedas. And that includes planting by moon phases, the whole thing. And you got to think about that. In India, they've been farming for thousands of years successfully. It's one of those sustainable places. I mean, historically, okay. And there are some historic examples of actual sustainability. And in biodynamics, there's a thread that runs through this whole thing. Okay. The thread that runs through the whole thing is organic matter additions. Whether you want to go crazy into the science behind it or not. I mean, it's kind of not necessary. I mean, I know my ancestors farmed this way. They didn't know what was going on, but they knew it worked. See? And so biodynamics was then later, they did trials in Switzerland for 21 years straight where they compared biodynamic versus organic versus conventional. And guess what? The lowest cost per unit of grain or corn or whatever it was from biodynamics. It wasn't the highest yield, but it was the lowest cost per unit. That's what counts. So biodynamics is proven, and a paper was published in Nature magazine. 21 years, and this was a government agency of Switzerland and a research farm, and they carried out incredible research for 21 years. Okay, so the big chemical industry and academia objected, and they wanted it taken off of Nature magazine. They wanted it retracted. They didn't want any part of that study becoming public because it validates the biodynamic approach. See? So there's been this struggle for years against the organic biodynamic or biotech approach. So it's called snake oil. It's called who knows what, But see, but now it's called biostimulants. and BioAg, my company, now sells stuff to some of these petrochemical-based suppliers that used to call it snake oil. Now they're buying it. Okay. So it's been a long path, but we're not there yet because we have 40 to 60 more crops possible. This is research done by MIT. How long can the soil last? What do we got left? Well, at the present way we farm and what we're doing, we might have between 40 and 60 crops before total decline to where you have low or no crop yields or all kinds of insect and pest damage, and you have mass starvation. Okay, that's the reality. Okay, so it comes full circle. See, the chemical, what I call industrial approach or soil mining, really, it's a mining mentality where you mine, you get everything you can get out of that mine, and you move on and try to find another mine. Okay, so this is what the world is facing. So the soil matters to an extreme level. I mean, it's the difference between whether we even have a civilization in 50 or 60 years. It's the biological approach. Yeah, it's totally biological versus chemical. It's a different mentality. It's the mechanical versus the life. It's like anti-life versus life.
Yep.
Positive. Yeah. So this is what the world's facing, and this is no joke. You know, I don't want to bring people down. I seem to always bring people down in what I'm saying.
Don't feel bad. I do the same thing. You know,
Yeah.
trying to speak truth.
Yeah.
It's often harsh to hear.
It's very, very harsh. Yeah, I spent 2 days at the UFO festival listening to researchers on UFOs. That's another example of a subject that's highly suppressed and covered up, that has incredible significance. But it doesn't even matter, because if the soil is degraded, and I mean, this is the basic mechanism of survival of life on Earth. So once that soil goes down and turns into brick, and you go to town and get a job, well, it's just a matter of time. You know, you're going to have a major, and we've had these in history. You know, we wonder what happened to the Sumerians, what happened to the Maya, what happened to, you know, da da da. Oh, what happened to them? Well, they burned the soil out, for one thing, under pressure from despots wanting to tax them by taking their grain. And there's even theories now is, should we even have started agriculture? You know, did it make us healthier? No, actually, just the opposite.
Yeah,
the hunter-gatherers were in better shape than we are today. That's for sure. You know, so agriculture led to despotic governments because they could take your grain. Even in Germany, people paid their taxes to the baron by bringing in wine, and they had like 30,000-gallon wine barrels in the castle's basement where you would submit your tax, which was the wine you produced. So, you know, they're taking your shit, right? And if back in the hunter-gatherer days, not so much, you know, because it wasn't stuff that was
well, you didn't have access. You weren't forced to produce.
Didn't have access, and you didn't have stuff that was storable
or going bad.
Yeah.
Throw away. Waste.
Yeah. So civilization developed based on agriculture and the wealth produced by farmers, peasants, whatever you want to call them. And then it, you know, kind of spun out of control, you know, with greedy people at the top obtaining the wealth, or taking the wealth from the farmers who were getting it from the soil. And then, you know, this caused these psychopaths to start wars and want to conquer, you know, and the whole, you know, nightmare of these people that took over essentially, to no benefit to farmers. And so, oh, well, modern agriculture, you know, we got chemicals and oil and everything. It's great and it's really good. Yeah, well, we used to have 48% farmers in the country. I think back, you know, a couple hundred years ago or less. I mean, I remember it myself, and I'm 77, but I remember it. It used to be. I remember family farms. Yeah.
Farm aid was in the 80s, where we were losing farmers so fast due to this, exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so that's it. So who did it help? Now we have 1% farmers.
And we have 1% that controls the globe.
Exactly. And so what do we really do? I mean, I definitely have the answers of what should be done and how we can turn the soil around and how we can, you know, be more efficient, and actually how we can turn around global warming. It goes back to, I was influenced by people back in the days of Acres USA and EcoAg. And there was a guy named John Hamaker who wrote a book, Survival of Civilization. And he had it all figured out, what was causing global warming, you know, increase in CO2, et cetera, because of demineralization. So how do we turn it around? remineralization.
Very simple. It is.
The guy was right. This was like a book in 74. He's right. Okay. He's been proven correct. And so the way to turn it around is exactly what he said, although he didn't know specifically, how to do that.
Yep.
Is remineralization. And I got involved with rock dust that I bring in from Australia when I was in Hawaii and doing remineralization and humic acids and all that. My God, I mean, the results are like you're turning back the clock, And here in the Willamette Valley, wow. I mean, this used to be considered the garden of the world. And it had such incredible crops and yields and everything. And now they can barely make it. They just have to farm bigger acreages and get bigger tractors, But
it's crazy.
But I turned around pieces of ground back to fantastic results just by understanding what the limiting factors are and what happened to the ground over all those years and how to turn it around in one season. Yeah. And even more. I mean, now we're working with a specific fungi that produces volatile organic compounds that does all these things that biostimulants are supposed to do. So the answer is in biology. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's how it's always been. And then remineralization. You still have to remineralize because the rain is so acidic that you get your pH way down, or in the case of Western U.S., it's too alkaline because they're using alkaline irrigation water from groundwater. So the pH is crazy out of whack, like because of acid rain. So you have to deal with pH, and of course that's going to take like rock dust, like lime specifically, or slag. I prefer like calcium silicate slag, and carbonate rock and stuff like that. So you do have to consider the pH. So that's where minerals come in. And of course, the humic substances are sort of minerals. They're sort of biomineral substances, right? And so that's how you turn it around. Okay. But how do you turn the people around? That's the part I don't know.
That's why we do this podcast, my friend.
That's why we do the podcast. I get to talk to some people.
Right. Education. It's the only way.
Yeah. So it's really about education. And I want to stress again that we're talking about the survival of civilization, which is John Hamaker's book. I should grab a copy and show it. I don't know. Oh yeah, here it is. Matter of fact, I have it right on my shelf.
Perfect.
I'm going to show you that book that I saved for all these years. Okay, all these years. There it is.
Amazing. See if that's available online, Ken, if you could. It might be one of those books that they don't even allow printing anymore.
I don't know, but it's the 3 problems threatening our existence.
Yep.
I'm seeing the letter backwards on here. I don't know whether you are, but
no, it looks fine. It looks fine.
So soil, tectonic, climate, economic systems explained. This guy went into economic systems too, and how that can bring our downfall. And he's correct.
Well, they're all intertwined.
They're all intertwined.
You can't have one.
It's what they call the capital cycle. Okay, so you create money out of nothing, out of debt. You buy a tractor, you sign a paper, they create the money for the tractor, right? So you can then overproduce everything. See, so the slice of the pie gets thinner and thinner. Hence, we have only 1% farmers. Okay, so who benefited? Not the farmers.
Or nor did we, because everything is so expensive because it's controlled by the 1%.
Yeah. And if you pump enough money into something, just like out here, like the craft beer or the cannabis dispensaries, if there's lots of money, everybody jumps in and nobody makes a profit.
Right.
So that's the capital cycle. Tie that in with the soil cycle, the climate cycle. You got a problem. And Hamaker was right. He was right in 1982 or something. Now, this has got a Library of Congress number in it. It's matter of fact, Don Weaver, annotations by Don Weaver, and it was published by Hamaker Weaver Publications. Don Weaver was the person he's still out there promoting soil remineralization. He's got a website, and he's like an old timer like me now, but he started out as young idealistic guys. But he was pushing this Hamaker idea and the remineralization. Oh God, I can't. So that's the problem that we have to solve on the planet Earth today. And how do we do it? That's up to the next generation.
Well, I think that there is a very big awakening that occurred, post-COVID, where people started questioning, where's my food coming from? Why am I working so hard? What am I getting out of my life other than, pain and misery? So I think in many ways, the next generation, the seeds have been planted. It's just a matter of.
Hey, how are you?
Yeah, I'm on a web. Let me get back to you.
All right, I just sent you an email. Read the email.
Busy guy, Bob. Busy guy.
Yeah, that's about land that I'm trying to save in Belize, a rainforest, what's left of it.
Yep.
It's been a 30-year struggle there. I mean, yeah, you have such a greedy world. It's just a nightmare,
Well, it's the greed is based on extractionist economy. So you just extract without any thought whatsoever about, wait a minute, there's a limited amount of these resources. Sooner or later, you're going to get to the tipping point. And I'll be honest, Bob, I mean, I knew this stuff, I was like into this stuff and the occult and conspiracy theories when I was a kid. And, I had that same feeling of like, oh my God, like, thank God I'm going to be off this planet before the real shit hits the fan. I don't think so, dude. I think it's like we're in it now. We're fucking in it.
Yeah, we totally are.
And I don't know as we can stop it before it gets cataclysmic. I know we could reverse it once it happens, but I don't think we can stop it because the money is just so used to having complete control without consequences that they're going to just run us right off the cliff like the dodos. But
well, yeah, I mean, it gets deeper. It's even deeper and deeper and deeper than that. Like I said, we had the McMinnville UFO Festival, which they have every year for the last 20 years because of a UFO sighting here in McMinnville in 1950. But anyway, these are the top people from around the country, including Air Force fighter pilot, Brian Graves. I met him, and a lot of other researchers that work for the government. And what's going on with this whole UFO thing, right? Where they had offered us, and they have like free energy systems, which they offered us if we would eliminate nuclear weapons and nuclear warfare. But they were turned down. Now, it could be that somebody has that technology, but this is the most covered up thing there is that whole story of aliens and UFOs and what's going on there. Now, whether they will intervene or not, that's unknown.
Well, I mean, you've heard of the Tartarians, correct?
Yeah.
All right. That was buried. That was taken away from us by the greed of the Rothschilds, to be specific. They were the ones that created the whole money game, borrowing money, and they were kicked out of every country
Yeah,
Europe.
so this actual story goes all the way back. Yeah, Rothschilds and the money men and the bankers, but it goes all the way back to the Sumerians.
Yeah, of course it
So
does.
this started a long time ago. See, and it's still apparently, who's pulling this puppet strings? Who's controlling the whole thing? So, I try to look at the whole big picture. It's not really. Can I make something encouraging out of this? Well, I guess, yeah, I probably could tell you some encouraging things about this. Bottom line is, I think we're on our own. I don't think, I don't know whether they're going to intervene. I don't know whether it matters. Like, would we intervene if the ant population started to have a problem? I don't know. And I think that's, I'm going to another high-end meeting the end of the month. But still, forget all that. Again, the soil matters. I mean, you can circle back to that.
So
that's where we get everything. That's it. That's the whole thing.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. So who are you working with in the DNA extractions? Using biomakers, Mr. DNA?
Yeah, biomakers. Okay.
Yeah, they're doing some great work over there. And I really love the new bee crop platform. I think that's going to be a really big advantage to farmers. I often get asked the question, oh, what's the NPK value of this or that? And it's like, all right, so I want you to ask yourself a question. I want you to think about C NPK, so carbon or organic matter and NPK, because you can't use NPK if you don't have carbon to break it down on a molecular level. So then I usually get the person to say, oh, well, I've heard a lot about carbon, CO2, climate change, carbon sequestering, carbon banking, carbon storing. So what is all that about? Well, let me ask you another question. If you look at NPK as CNPK, why don't you look at it as CNPK C pre-NPK in biology? There's your answer. Before NPK, all we did was C, as in a form of either plant residue or manure, and biology would take that and convert it into humic and fulvic acids and all the expressions therein, providing the plants to provide the necessary defenses for them to grow and thrive and produce tremendous amounts of nutrient-rich food, which was, again, the key to our health and our well-being at that point in time. So, that being said, we do have all of the answers that we need. It's just we don't have the control to move the needle, so to say, and get the traction that we should have. I mean, I can't tell you how many technologies I've seen just getting buried and pummeled, and no one will invest in them, even though they're the best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah, that's it. They won't invest in it because everything's about profit and short-term profit. I'm talking to some people in Europe right now that might finance some of this because they're looking for the answers and actually to do something about it.
So one of the things that I haven't shared with you because we haven't talked in a while is a company called Ecosphere Sciences. And what they're doing is they created an aerobic digester, which I didn't think was possible. I questioned their abilities to do that. I couldn't poke holes in them. I actually got them to bring the machine down here to SoCal and demoed it, and then began this rabbit hole journey of like, what the hell did they actually create? So they take food waste or green waste and they grind it up to a point where then they can macerate it. They run it through a biodigester, which is aerobically stabilized, heated in pH to 7.0. And then they run it through a bio bed, a pre-digester, and then an output tank, or the aeration tank is what they call it. And what we're seeing as a result of it is a whole new form of organic matter. It's DOM, dissolved organic matter. I don't know if you've begun to start using that term as well.
Well, of course, that's exactly what our product is.
Exactly.
In other words, it's a solubilized, activated humic substance. Humic acid is fulvic acid. Okay, fulvic acid is liquid organic matter.
Yep.
What it is.
Exactly right.
It's not about NPK or minerals or anything. It's about organic species of carbon,
Yep. Yep. And
polyphenols, quinones, aromatic, biochemistry. It's organic.
exudates.
It's liquid organic matter.
Yeah. Another prime
What it is.
exudates.
And yeah, you can create it, like what you just said, by digestion, by a number of means. You can create the so-called humic substance, and we know specifically which ones and how much. And we can. Matter of fact, a lot of work has been done around the world on exactly what you're talking about. And not only that, comparing it. In other words, doing the functional group. Is it going to be the same as humates? Is it going to do the same stuff? Like, how do they compare? Well,
so far,
very favorably. But here's the real answer. I'll tell you what the real answer is. They have millions of tons of municipal wastes, not just what you're talking about, but like leaves, branches. People's, raking the leaves and the branches and here in Oregon and the whole West Coast really, as Recology, a company that composts very large scale composting. And there's a company that makes the equipment in Washington State. Okay, so that material and the work has been done by Chinese and Europeans and everybody, that you can convert that municipal waste by specific composting. It's not exactly like composting, but it's using specific fungi that can turn it into humic substances, just to make this simple discussion. And since it's all contaminated with plastics, they end up with tons of it they can't sell because it's got plastic film in it. See? So I found a microorganism, fungi, that can actually eat plastic and convert, the wood, the bark, all that stuff, the lignin, right, to humic substances, because lignin is the source for humic substances by microorganisms. So I'll take that even so we could just utilize all those wastes of all kinds, organic matter, leaves. Lignin is crucial. That's where the tannins are, right? And we could produce humic substances very cheaply.
Oh, I know, my friend.
Without digging it up somewhere, like wherever it's mined, North Dakota, New Mexico, wherever. There's lots of it out there. But in other words, we have enough waste materials to turn things around, if it's processed correctly. And we know how to do that now.
Well, again, the problem is that the compost companies are extractionist based. They don't give a shit about the soil.
No, they don't.
Make their money. And I've run into that repeatedly out here in working. I mean, remember, I bought that lenadite spence from you for a compost project here in Oxnard, working with Agronomy, and we were incredibly successful in accomplishing the arrest of the thermophilic process in order to store all the minerals and not let them volatilize off as a gas form. But at the end of the day, we took their 0.501 crap compost and turned it into a 4.521 organic fertilizer. And they shut the project down. It was too successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, this is what we're up against. See,
I know.
I mean, the world is providing scientists all over the world. The Chinese are way ahead of us. I get a lot of my info from Chinese. They are really, really far ahead of us. But how are we going to accomplish this? I had figured out a process. I can get the bark waste, or this municipal waste, not bark, but bark's another thing. But I'm talking about hardwood wastes from hardwoods, because that's the lignin. Forget the softwood stuff like Douglas fir. No, that ain't it. But the plastics and all, okay, well, I found a microbe that it'll eat plastics. So it'll convert plastic into humic acid along with lignins. Okay, but who's going to invest in this? Who's going to put this together? Who's going to make that? See, there's the missing link.
Oh, I know.
And I'm sure I'm not the only one that's got like answers to these problems. But it's who controls the money controls what's kind of going to happen, you know.
Absolutely, and controls the minds. Unfortunately,
so they control the minds too, and they know how to do it. You know, they use science to be able to control people's minds.
Yep,
propaganda and you know the whole thing, right?
The narrative. It's all about the narrative.
See, here's the good part of the story. Well, it's kind of tragic, but when I lived in Hawaii, I studied ancient Hawaiian agriculture because these were Stone Age people. They didn't have metals. They didn't have they couldn't buy stuff. They didn't have money. And there was, in fact, no place to buy it. It was like 2,400 miles from the nearest mainland. They were isolated in the Pacific. That's it. They couldn't bring anything in. They didn't have metals. Yet they had thousands of years of successful agriculture. What did they do? You know, how did they do it? I wrote a paper on that, how they did it, what they did. Well, part of it was how they were organized, how their society was organized. There were spiritual community values. It was working together. They just had figured it out over the centuries, right? But how did they fertilize their fields? It's an interesting story. Okay, what was their source? How did they build the soil, which they did tremendously? Leaves. That's it. They'd send kids up the trees. They'd strip the leaves off the trees. And they were the kikuyu nut and mango later on in history, hardwoods. The leaves, the kids would climb the trees, strip the leaves, then they would mash them with their feet into the mud of these flooded paddies that they created. That was it.
Yeah, the endophytic transfer.
Leaves.
One type to another.
Microbial activity. And then when they grow a crop like taro or sweet potatoes was the big one in Kona. Sweet potatoes, after they'd harvest the crop, they'd put pigs in there. And they had stone walls around these paddocks. They put the pigs in. The pigs would root the whole thing up and eat the pieces of unharvested sweet potato or whatever it was.
Hey, it was called tilling.
Yeah, they would do the tilling. They would do some fertilizing too, right?
Yeah.
And that's their whole program. That was it.
Yep, and then they have a nice big barbecue with the pig at the end of the night.
And they'd have plenty of taro and sweet potatoes, and they made poi, and the whole thing was the whole fertility input. And they starting out with lava.
Oh, I know. It's crazy.
Okay. And their whole input was leaves. Mm-hmm. And that's it.
Well, let's face it, lava also has a lot of mineral topes.
A lot of minerals, sure. Yeah. There's tons of minerals, especially in that area.
Yep.
That's because I farmed that myself. And I was over there this winter, and I was just disgusted. You know, like most of the farms and the people that I knew, they were gone. Everything was overgrown. The Mexican mafia took over the coffee farms, and you know, it was just a disgusting situation. And you know, and a lot of that land, the Kona field system, where they build all that soil with leaves, and they live for thousands of years. Now it's right down to pure lava rock. It's oxidized all the organic matter because they were organic, man-made organic soils. You see the same thing in the Amazon, Terra Petra, and certain other areas in Central America. So, you know, they build these soils from nothing more than cycling organic matter. Which
leaves and leaves.
The trees had deep roots. They had mycorrhizal fungi. They had a fungal rhizosphere effect. They dissolved the minerals from that lava, which was mineral rich, and it would be brought up into the leaves, and then they'd use those leaves to fertilize the surface soil to grow their food crops. So that's the system they had. It didn't require chemicals, fertilizers, or even metal tools.
Nope.
So
Just labor and leaves, labor,
let's
leaves, and water.
build from there, you know.
Yep.
And so humates is nothing more. Compost is humates, by the way. So humates like leonardite, which are ancient compost, is nothing more than leaves.
Yep. Exactly.
Leaves, bark, branches, trees, maybe a dinosaur here and there thrown in, you know. So it's the same simple principle.
So
Trees, microbes, leaves, decomposition.
So let me ask you a question on the rabbit hole of breaking apart humic substances. You talked about 800 or more individual compounds that create the humic acid chain. Do we know when you start breaking it apart what the different effects are, or is that just way too complicated for us to even begin?
No, some of the components help what they call ion transfer or nutrient transfer, chelation effects, biostimulant effects, plant resistance, microbial stimulation. It has to do with different molecular weights and actually different chemical compounds. Like humic acid is not, there's no such thing as humic acid or fulvic acid. That's not a thing. That's defined as a fraction of organic matter or humic substances. It's a fraction. So, humic acid is the alkaline soluble fraction, and fulvic acid is the acid soluble fraction. So within those two groups, there's hundreds of individual. It's not like a big molecule. It's a fraction of organic matter, and within that fraction, there's 800 or more. I mean, that's being conservative. Other people say way more than 800 different compounds, but those have been, doing laboratory tests with new equipment. They know there's about at least 800 different compounds. So it's just soup. It's all things.
So has anybody ever created a flow chart of as it breaks down, what the different breakdown pieces do?
Yeah.
Is that something that's publicly available?
Yeah. If you're a biochemist and you want to go to the scientific literature, there's tons of it. Sure. I have like a gigantic collection of all this stuff. But I mean, most people, it's going to be Greek to them,
Yeah.
But we our knowledge base is way ahead of the actual application of anything. Way ahead.
Interesting.
Like the way I see it, the way agriculture operates around here. Yeah, we got the big equipment, sure, but it's Stone Age, in terms of it's not even Stone Age. I mean, the Hawaiians were Stone Age. They did a pretty good job,
Right.
It's industrial. With no thought whatsoever about soil life, microbes, organic matter. Just dump it on some more ammonium nitrate, whatever, and then rescuing the crops with chemicals. And these farmers are they're victims, but they're manipulated by the barons and the king or whatever.
Yep.
The powers to be, the elite, the money men. Matter of fact, the bankers tell them what they can and cannot do. I used to have that problem. I'd make a recommendation to farmers to use bioproducts or bioorganics or whatever. And they say, well, I got to talk to my banker first to see if he approves.
I know. They'll only pay for fertilizer. They won't pay for anything else.
Yeah. So you have, that whole scenario. And again, the science is so vastly ahead of the actual practice. And it's way beyond even people with, let's say, a bachelor's degree in chemistry. I mean, it's beyond that.
Oh, believe me, I know. I've been going down the DNA rabbit hole.
And bottom line is, what is all that going to get you? Yeah, I'm interested in it. I want to know about it, but I am a scientist. But I don't need it. I didn't need it 30 years ago. I was getting record crop yields. I didn't know any of that.
Yep.
But I did know, what worked. And again, I mean, my ancestors have a tradition of knowing what worked. And I was just relying on that plus organic and biodynamic theory. I didn't need to know biochemistry or any of this, but I was interested in why there wasn't any insects. That was important to me because that was a deeper story, you know.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, it's, again, it has the plant has its defenses, and it sends up a basic signal that, hey, I'm healthy, don't come over here. Or if you do, you're not gonna like what I do to you.
It's things like that, you know. And
blow your stomach up.
My interest was with biocontrol, and of course, I did research in Southern California. I worked for some big companies testing biopesticides and things like that, like fungal biopesticides, which they didn't go ahead with. By the way,
of course not.
Yeah, I came up with totally the cure for mites on strawberries in California. I mean, I didn't come up with it, but I did the actual field research in the strawberries that proved it. That this fungus called Neozygetes floridana would totally eliminate the mite problem, the spider mite in strawberries, and proved it. So experimentally in strawberry fields in San Diego County, right?
So if it's any consolation, you might enjoy this. I helped kill crown rot fungi in strawberries, and guess what? They're not doing it.
No, right. That's the point. You know, and so I try to get people. I said, I know how to do it. I know how to produce that culture. You know, it can make a big difference. But you have the government, you have the registration, and it's just beyond.
Well, it's the control. It's all the control.
Yeah. So the problem is, we may have the answers. Maybe we already had the answers. Maybe we had the answers for centuries.
Yeah, exactly right. But we can't implement them because of the control. So I hate to do this to you, but I think that this is important. Normally at 1 hour and a half, we take questions from the audience.
That's fine.
We only have 4 questions, but some of them are going to be a little bit long-winded. So let's go ahead and dive into those questions, because I think they're very valid and good questions that I'm sure the audience is going to be thrilled to hear. So this is Ken. Ken, go ahead and tee it up, my friend.
Okay, we're going to start out with Billy. If Dr. Faust could talk about Bio-Supercil and Ion 14, I've had some great success with them.
Yeah, good one. Yeah, good question. Yeah, I should have hit this earlier, that concept. Okay, so the work I was doing about decline in crops, I was working with a guy named Dr. Manichenkov, who was a Russian. He was hired by Florida to, what's wrong with the citrus? How come the citrus is dying? And I was working with macadamia nuts in Hawaii, and they wanted to know, why are the macadamia nut trees dying? Decline, you know what they call decline in tree crops, right? So we were doing this research together, and he was the president of the International Silicon Society. Okay, and he's done a lot of work, you know, on silicates. And I was sending him samples of lava from Hawaii that were high in silicic acid, silicates, right? So he was testing different things. So it turned out that, you know, years of research, here we go down the rabbit hole, that the 2 main limiting factors for decline in any crop, in any given soil, is activated humic compounds and monosilicic acid. They're the 2 biggies, because the silicic acid is formed by complex means, by microbial activity on silicate rock, and it's very biological to take it from silica, which is like silicon dioxide, you know, sand, right, to silicic acid, which is fairly reactive. It's important. But it's crucial to, again, protect the plant against fungal diseases and increase phosphate availability. Big time. Okay? So then the humic substances play a part in the whole thing, because of all these other compounds that the plant needs, the chelation effect, biostimulant effect, all these effects. So the 2 biggies are the humic substances and monosilicic acid. Okay, so then I made a product where we combined we actually reacted a humic substance or humate with a monosilicic acid. And then we used that in Hawaii, and it was fantastic. I could not believe it. I had test plants in my greenhouse. I had tomatoes, I had green peppers. And in Hawaii, they're always diseased. Like they got viruses, they got fungus, they got a problem. So the results were like, holy shit. Like, look at this, look at the control. It's like a sickly little thing. Look at the treated with the silicon and the humic acid. Okay, so that was ion 14. That's how ion 14 started. Okay, then we started working more with hydroponics, and the problem is that monosilicic acid is very reactive. So it'll like hook up, it'll combine with stuff. So if you put salt fertilizer or hydroponics, for instance, the phosphate will link up, or the calcium will link up with the silica. And if you put silicic acid in that hydroponic water and you don't do it right, the right amount, it turns white because it'll react and form like other compounds. It's so reactive, like calcium silicate or potassium silicate or whatever. And these can't be used by the plant very, very well. Okay. So then we work with a German company, and we got Nano-silica. Okay. So if you combine humic acids, humic substances with Nano-silica, guess what happens? The Nano-silica is still silica. It's not silicic acid. It's not reactive. It doesn't combine with other stuff and form an insoluble thing, chemical. But the particles, nano-sized particles, can be taken directly into the vascular system of the plant through the water. It's absorbed. And actually, now we know there's a set of bacteria that live in the root that go out and feed in front of the root.
Yeah, endophytes.
And then they go back into the root, okay? And they release something, nutrients. Okay, so the plant, by whatever means, takes in the nanoparticles and the humic acid, because that definitely increases the permeability of the cell membrane, cell wall, and all this. Okay, so that nanoparticle gets in there. The plant cell itself converts it to monosilicic acid.
Mm-hmm.
It happens internally within the plant. And the results are fantastic. I mean, we actually spent a lot of money. This research facility in Canada that works on hydroponic and greenhouse tomatoes, not only was the yield better, the color was better, the flavor was better. And then in the terpenes and all this in cannabis, terpenes, and in grapes, we found malic acid, all the things that the winemakers are looking for increased. See, so silica is super, super crucial limiting factor and absolutely has to be taken care of. Now, like when you make compost or something and humates, it has a significant amount of silica, silicic acid. It doesn't last long. There's not much. There's some. Now, I learned the hard way. I was over in Hawaii, and there's a lot of cannabis growers over there back in the day, okay? And they were the ones bringing in all kinds of organic fertilizers. The dealers over there were bringing them in. They were bringing in biodynamic compost from Pennsylvania. They were bringing in stuff from Japan. So there was this product, I think it was called Shell 15, something like that. And they swore by this, the cannabis growers. What the hell is Shell 15? I was like, it's from Japan, and it had a label on it, 15% silicic acid.
Cool.
Again, didn't know why. Knew that it worked, but we didn't know why. Now we know how important silicic acid is, how crucially important it is. And then the work with Matachenkov, we found out that the cheapest and the best source of of silicic acid was calcium silicate slag from steel mill. It's produced with electric air furnace. Okay. So they put all this, they grind up old cars, they throw them into this air furnace, and they throw in limestone on top, right? So they cook that, make the steel, and the limestone absorbs the impurities. That's why it's high in manganese and some other elements, iron. And that is like artificial lava. Okay. It comes out of that steel mill like red hot. And then they quench it with water. And that's what they call EAF slag. So that's a high source of silicic acid and calcium. So when we're talking about acid soils like here, you need calcium. I mean, calcium is the queen of the nutrients. So you need calcium for sugars and just, so they found out the slag was the best, right? But slag's not easy to work with. Fortunately, right here in McMinnville, we have a steel mill. And I have somebody going to bring me a load of the slag, because I put that slag out here in the Willamette Valley on my other farm in Independence, where BioAg is. And we were using it to like make roads and put it on my runway at my airport and all. And the grass would be like, I can't believe it. Look at the grass here. And this is a soil that had a 4.5 pH. You put that slag on there and it's like, oh my God. Look at the growth. Like, why aren't farmers using this? It blows my mind. It's incredible. It's $16. They just charge you for loading it.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. But then back in Idaho days and Montana days, I worked for a mining company that mined a product in a place called Sulphurdale, Utah, a volcano, fumarole, right? So it had about 24% sulfur. And we put that on ground in Montana and Idaho. It's fantastic. The yields are just about double. Now we knew that ground was deficient in sulfur. See, so we got a big sulfur response, but there was more to it. Then I had it analyzed. This is before I knew about Hawaii or the Shelf 15 or Dr. Manichenkov or anything. There's this stuff we dug out of the side of a volcano, had fantastic results. So I had it tested, 13% silicic acid.
There you go.
It's because this volcano had these deposits of calcium in the strata. And this stuff is coming up. It was the liquid. You had to pump water out of these fumaroles to mine this stuff. The pH of the water was 2. It was sulfuric acid. But it was alive with microbes.
Yeah.
What they call methanogens. These are ones that their media is sulfuric acid. And they produce methane. And they have all kinds of other things. So we didn't know any of this. We just knew, again, we knew the stuff worked incredibly well. Didn't know why. Circle back. Now we're at ion 14 and supercell. Supercell is the answer. For certain situations like hydroponics, gardening, a lot of things. Industrial agriculture, we sell it, and they're spraying it, because it can be absorbed by the leaves or it can be a starter or something like that. But bottom line is, circle back, survival of civilization, remineralization, right? Calcium silicate slag. It's cheap, unbelievably effective, at least here in this soil type. Yeah. So the answers are there. But the average person, I borrowed a spreader from Simplot, and I was going to spread this slag, and it wrecked the spreader. I had to put my mechanic on it and fix it before I took it back. Because it's heavy, it's dense, it's like hard to work with, right? And So yeah, farmers are, but yeah. So that's another form of remineralization. But yeah, you're back to the ion 14 and the supercell.
Mhm.
That's a practical way of getting it
Yeah.
into the plant. But it's
Sure.
not going to do what silicate slag can do to certain types of soil because it doesn't have calcium. It doesn't have these trace elements. So for the soil, if you can get slag, get it. But I mean, that's not easy. And I found out in Hawaii too, they used to bring in barge loads of steel slag like this. Literally barges that carry 60,000 tons. And they
Mhm.
drag that barge from California, from steel mills, all the way to Hawaii to put on sugarcane.
Hmm.
And I saw places where they dumped the pile and they had guava and other tree crops. And where that pile was, they couldn't get it all up. Maybe there's 4 inches left. Those trees were incredible. Just loaded. You just like turning back the clock, on decline. So yeah, silica is like crucially important. And of
Mhm.
course, the leaves, the Hawaiians with their leaves and the trees, okay, they're pulling up silica. It's concentrating in the leaves. They
Mhm.
drop it back on the ground, the microbes break it down, and it releases the silica. Okay. So, these are observations, but now we kind of know why they work, right? So
Yeah.
so I had to come up with the best way of getting the job done in modern times, what we're doing, and that's the BioAg Supercell.
Cool.
And I won't take total credit for that because my partner Vic was involved in these nano things and did a lot of the work in putting that together.
Cool.
But
Speaking of
I
that,
used some today. I already used some out here. I'm playing corn today.
Are you still involved with BioAg, an officer, shareholder?
Yeah, but I don't. I'm not involved in the management or the day-to-day operations or selling it or anything. No,
Okay.
I do R&D and PR. Education and
Yeah.
new product development. I'm working on VOCs and turning as volatile organic compounds from a specific fungi that we're working with. It was developed by the USDA. We have
Cool.
license to. So I'm working on high-end stuff
Yeah.
and things that probably the humate industry would probably have me offed if they knew about. And that's, making humic and fulvic acid out of municipal waste, which
Yeah.
I'm not getting very far on because, I don't have any backing on this.
Yeah.
To do it. But I mean, that's the kind of things I'm trying to do. I'm not tied to the humate industry, even though I was involved in it. I was a member of the Humic Product Trade Association. I'm sure they hate my guts because I'm about humic acids, not necessarily mind humates. If I can create it from wastes that's
Why not?
locally available, and we don't have to use trucks to haul this stuff all over the place. Yeah, I'm all for it, but that's going to take big bucks, and we don't have big bucks. So that's what I do. It's more Mission Impossible, basically.
Well, and that's a perfect segue into eBay was asking. I would like to know what any projects that Dr. Faust is working on and would like to talk about. But you've just talked about and answered that question.
Yeah.
Well, we could do a whole nother show on that.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, believe me, there's answers, but those
Yep.
answers conflict with with the agenda, which is the same old agenda, the money men and
Yeah.
quick returns and then that kind of thing. It's not a way to manage stuff. It's like a different mentality, thought. It's not going to save the planet Earth. It's not managing a system. It's managing someone's idea of wealth. So they can have an elite family and live in have a like Bezos or people like that, Elon Musk, and people you know, and all through history, you know, I got to have a castle. No, I got to have another palace and a castle, and I need a couple more yachts. And it's all bullshit you don't need. I mean, but those people and they're what they want and what they're doing. I mean, they got some problem emotionally or mentally or something. That's wrecking it for the rest of us.
Mhm.
Well, it's the greed, unfortunately. It gets contagious. It's addictive. The more you have, the more you want. It's never enough. And very few people get to a point where they go, I have enough that I can't even use or see. What have I accomplished? And that's the aha moment. But unfortunately, very few people get to that. Kind of like, you know, the heroin addict gets to a point where he goes, oh my God, I've destroyed my whole life. I need to get off this and clean my shit up. Most of them don't ever get there. They end up dying.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
just,
You end up. You know, I could tell you some stories about Hawaiians that I knew that got hooked into heroin and what happened to them. Well, it's interesting, but but anyway,
Well, I
yeah.
think we'll get back to the next question. We'll stay away from that, Bob. If we could talk about soil decomposition providing CO2 indoors so we can stop using bottled CO2. Do you know much about that?
Yeah. I mean, that's a pet peeve of mine, you know. We're releasing more CO2. Like, what the fuck? You know, like, well, what happens is, you know, in normal decomposition of organic matter by fungi, it's releasing CO2. Okay. So when I work with VOCs and I'm using a spawn medium like grain or lignocellulosic wastes and cellulose, right? Lignins and cellulose. Okay. So you get microbes start working on that and they're releasing CO2 and not just CO2, they're releasing volatile organic compounds or VOCs that are very complex chemistry. We're not even sure like what's going on there, but it has an incredible crop stimulation. Forget the CO2. I mean, CO2 is also being evolved and we can measure it. And absolutely, because that's plant food. It's not fertilizer, it's CO2. That's what plants eat, but they need, they need photosynthesis to turn that into sugars. That's all it is. Okay, but the thing of it is, like the breakdown of raw organic matter. Again, you buy those kits. They have the Pleurotus oyster mushroom on straw. Okay, so that's converting straw to well, most of what you get out of that is CO2, and you can get some mushrooms. You know, and I used to do this kind of stuff. So, bottom line is, you don't need the bottle of CO2. You just need my latest invention that releases the CO2 from relatively cheap, almost free media, and it releases the volatile organic compounds that are actually biostimulants better than anything you've ever seen or can buy. So the action of that organism, it's I can't ever remember the name, Glirocidium spirosporum. It's a fungi that produces, it's patented by the USDA, and we have the patent rights to it. And we're trying to figure out how to use it. But it's going to do everything that those things you buy, the mushroom bag, the straw, and it releases CO2. That's easy. And I was doing that for years. So that's a good thing. Okay, but what we got now is doing the CO2 release and the volatile organic biostimulant release. That's a very specific organism that does this. So it's a pure culture kind of a operation. See, so yeah, you'll get your CO2 release from fungal activity, and in fact, they found that the record yields for certain crops like corn would occur in fields that have a dish shape, like concave, because and they use a lot of manure, a lot of compost, a lot of stuff. So you get a lot of biological activity, and it's releasing CO2, which is heavier than air. And so it settles down in that concave area, certain fields that have a shape like a dish, and the CO2 levels build up and they get the record yield. So organic farming is effective. Well, that's one of the reasons.
So
You're adding organic matter and it's getting broken down, and a lot of it is released as CO2.
so
And that's how it works.
so Bob, is the fungi a saprobe, a mycorrhizae, or is it a yeast?
No, neither. Well, it's a saprophytic fungi. Yeah. I mean, in other words, its media is, well, I can grow it on sugar. Okay. I mean, in other words, most of these things, it boils down to sugar. Okay. But they have enzyme systems that can convert cellulose, which is a simple sugar, to a glucose or some kind of soluble sugar. It's just like how an enzyme can convert grain into sugar, and then yeast can ferment it and produce alcohol. Okay, so what happens is the CO2 is released from the cellulose. So you have to. That's where cover crops come in. That's where compost comes in. It's additions of organic matter, the right kind of organic matter, every year. I mean, on a regular basis, right? And then that you get the CO2 from and the VOCs, which we didn't know about before, from the decomposition and release the CO2. Matter of fact, the new soil test that I'm promoting now, that I'm doing for people, it's called the Haney test. It's developed by USDA, a guy named Haney, and it has a soil health test included. And what it does, it measures the evolution of CO2.
Cool.
It takes a day, they put it in a chamber, and they can measure, they can compare, and that's a soil health factor, whether the CO2 is being released.
Now, you sent me the this Mana Life Lab. Are they doing that and giving those results?
No. We use Midwest Labs in Omaha, and they do the test. There's only a few labs that do it. They're big labs, and they do the whole thing. Soil nutrient availability, saturation, pH, all the usual stuff, plus soil health in addition to it. And that's equipment that can measure the evolution of CO2 from and other factors from the soil sample you send.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe Biomakers is partnering with them.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. They want to see both of those tests. So for my clients here, we're doing both. We're doing the Haney test and the bee crop test. Nice. And that gives us what microorganisms are happening or not happening. And so let's say we want to do a before test with bee crop and Haney test, and we see what we got. What's the soil health rating? What's the different microbes? And they have different classes, the ones that are biocontrol, the ones that produce biostimulants, the ones that evolve CO2, blah, blah, blah. That all comes out in that bee crop test. And then you can put something on, like some snake oil, buy some snake oil from me, or Bioeg, or whoever, and then you go through a crop season and take the next test. Okay, what happened? Well, what happens is you've just increased the fungal dominance, and all the good guys are happy.
Well, and that kind of leads into our next question, Bob. If you could talk about your opinion on the optimum fungi to bacteria ratio in soil health.
Yeah, well, it's basically fungal dominance over bacteria is what it is. Because once you get bacterial dominance, and you get that because there's not enough organic matter, because fungi have to have raw organic matter to live off of. Whereas bacteria, they live off of like soil solution and other things. It's different. I mean, bacteria can live on sulfuric acid, for Christ's sake,
Yeah.
So bacteria can that's a different ball game. Okay. But the fungi is what gives you the mycelia that structure the soil and release phosphate and nutrients and protects again. I mean, it's fungi that produce antibiotics. That's where we got penicillin, terramycin. Okay. Bacteria is what kills you. What causes disease? I'm not saying all bacteria. That'd be ridiculous, because you have beneficial bacteria like Azotobacter, Azospirillum, etc. Okay, so it's complex. The bee crop tests for 24 million microorganisms. So, I can't give you specifics. I'm not there yet. Acres USA wants me to write an article on this. And I said, I don't have experience with it yet. I have a season worth of experience, then I can give my opinion. And, we're just starting with this. So, I don't know. I like the idea. Is it of any real value? Okay, that's coming. But the point of it is, let's go back to the Stone Age. It's about lignin and cellulose and fungi. Simple as that. And you need that. You need fungal dominance. The soil turns hard on you. Once you lose that. In other words, row cropping year after year, you'll lose that fungal dominance, and then you get bacteria, and then it gets hard. It gets real hard soil, and things are problems. And so you try to overcome with using chemical fertilizer, and you're never really going to get there.
No, it's going to degrade it even more.
Yeah, and then you get standing water, and you get root rot, and the roots won't penetrate, and all these things. I'm using this new soil tool that I got from one of my grow shop customers, and I put my hired man on it. He was a strong guy, and this has got forks with tines that go down about 2 feet, and you pull back on it, and broad fork, yeah. And you can loosen up that ground tremendously, and boy, what a difference that makes. See, so when you get that hard pan and that hard ground, you're kind of done, man. It's almost like time to go to town and get a job, and that's from bacterial dominance. So then you have to aerate the soil, break up that hard pan, get some food in there for the fungi. You don't necessarily have to add any fungi. They're going to kind of be there waiting, just like the earthworm eggs and stuff are waiting. And if things are right, they take off. Sugar, some people promote the idea of sugar. Now that's controversial. And I gave a speech up in Canada, and they're saying, well, you should add sugar, and I'm going, and they said, what do you think about adding sugar? And I said, taking sugar, extracting it from a sugar beet or another plant, and then putting it on your crop to grow another plant. I said, it just doesn't make sense to me, because that sugar is going to turn into alcohol, because yeast are going to eat it, right? And what happens with wine? You don't have to add anything. It's going to turn into alcohol, right? So sugar is just going to turn to alcohol. It's going to release some CO2, yes. But if you use humic substances, monosilicic acid, all the things I just got done talking about, that causes the plant to produce more sugars. And the excess sugars are released by the root system, and it helps all those microorganisms and fungi that live in the root zone that protect the plant and feed it.
And it's the right type of sugar going into the system.
The right type of sugar that gets utilized and not just broken down by a yeast, because it's right there in the root zone.
Yeah.
And so, I think people got pissed off at me by, what I was doing, because I was going against a university professor that was gave a speech before me, and he was talking about, oh yeah, adding sugar to your starter mix and all that, and then they made the mistake of asking me what I thought.
I think people really wanted to know the truth, though, Bob.
Yeah, he wanted to know the truth, but it kind of, the sponsor of the meeting, it was kind of part of his program.
Didn't say they liked the truth, but they wanted to get the truth.
Well, they got it. Okay. And I did get a
So-
standing ovation by some, but I did.
We
But
got one guy.
it's
He's
about
got some
sugars. The
nice-
plant produces sugars from CO2
Yeah.
in sunlight.
Yeah.
And we can help it
Mhm.
by feeding it what it really needs. And it's as simple as that. So you've got to continue. Again, it's tricky. It's what old Don Schriefer, who was a guy in Acres USA back in the day, he was a teacher. He was a good one. And he would talk about managing the decay systems. How do you manage decay systems in the soil to get, the right kind of decay? Not because if you do this wrong, if you put a whole bunch of straw or something out there and then try to plant a crop, you're going to have a problem. They used to say, oh, it sucks up all the nitrogen. But really, there's toxic components there too that are produced. So it's managing the decay systems. So that would be like composting. So instead of, you're digesting it and then you're putting it on. Now, the fungi can take control, And and then tillage, like we're talking about the broad fork. Okay, that's getting air into the ground. You're not going to deep plow where you plow all the organic matter like 8-10 inches down in the cold, dead part of the soil and bring the dead part of the soil up to the top. No.
Yeah.
You're managing the decay systems. Where does a fence post decompose? Where does a fence post rot? Right near the surface, a couple, 3 or 4 inches. That's where the action is.
So where the life is.
Yeah,
the
that's where
bulk
life
of the
is.
life.
And that's why you need different kinds of tillage.
Yeah.
Instead of deep moldboard plowing, you're loosening like with that broad fork, which is I recommend it. It's really but you better get a strong guy that works out in the gym.
You'll hurt yourself using one of those for a few hours.
Yeah. Well, I got a guy that works out in the gym every day.
Yeah, he's fine.
My worker, and he's
Can
like,
you send him my way?
Core. That's really getting to my core. I can feel it.
Go to the gym today.
Yeah, I know. I can feel it too.
You can feel it by watching him do it, Bob.
Yeah. But see, back in the day, how did I do this on a large scale? Well, we brought in these rippers from Lely in Holland. There's these big like subsurface rippers that lifted and shattered, and then the Lily Rotera, which it doesn't mix the soil like a rototiller or a disc. It's a tine that whirls around, so it stirs the soil. So you end up with maintaining the layering of that soil, where you're not changing things. You're just loosening it so you can plant, get air in there, lifting it with a ripper shank. So that's maintaining the decay systems and building humic acids or humic. Yeah. So was that what the question was? No, I forgot.
No, you nailed it. You nailed it. There's one more new one that just popped up though.
Okay. Somebody has got some nitroamino, but they put it in a glass jar and it's solidified. Is it still good to use?
Well, yeah, that stuff is. See, you take you make an extract and you dehydrate it. It's very hygroscopic, and if you let that bag get open, it's just going to turn into a block, right? Now, if you can somehow, I would recommend using hot water. I mean, again, like our humic acid it's like, do you make coffee with cold water or tea? So yeah, that's the thing with our full humic, like it dissolves nicely. Cytoplus, these products, great if you use hot water, and that's what you should do, because that's how you make an extract of anything. Is you use hot water, not cold water. Okay, so if you bust that stuff up, that nitroamino, and put it in hot water, and just it's going to dissolve eventually. and then it'll be okay. But yeah, it has a problem of it's hydroscopic. So is the humic acid products.
Mhm.
You know, they'll get hard, and as long as you can get it soluble again and use hot water and plenty of agitation and busting it up as much as you can. Oh no, I've seen this. I have the same problem. If I forget to seal the container properly,
Mhm.
I have the same problem with some of these health supplements I take. You know,
Yeah.
the same thing will happen. Oh, you asked about Monolife Lab. What does Monolife Lab do? Monolife Lab is health products.
Okay.
Yeah, it's animal supplements and human supplements. And my partner in that, who operates that, is a MD,
Fantastic.
integrative health professional. In other words, she's like a holistic doctor,
Mhm.
Nice.
MD degree. And we develop these mushroom extract products that give you increased longevity, anti-cancer effects, and the fulvic acid
Mhm. Which
for,
we need.
for human use, right?
Yeah.
And then back to the pigs and the cow deal. You know, we have a supplement called lecithin, which is for livestock. So that's what Monolife Lab is.
Cool.
It's part of the BioAg Corporation, which I still own. And that would be the entity that we'd be doing new research and development if I could ever get any backing.
Mhm.
Anybody cared, you know. And that's possible, I suppose.
Hey, Bob, hang in there.
And
Hang in.
talk to the Europeans, maybe they care. I don't know.
There you go.
But
Just
yeah.
hang in there. It'll happen eventually.
So
Hopefully.
yeah, matter of fact, Monolife Lab, just for anybody that happens to be in the Palm Springs area, the end of this month, and goes to Contact in the Desert, which is a gigantic like UFO like speakers and conference. It lasts 4 or 5 days. I'm going to be there, and Dr. Wanick's going to be there, and we're going to have a table there, a booth there,
Cool.
and we're also going to have the ag products,
Nice.
you know, for gardeners, because people say, well, yeah, you need to take this fulvic acid unless you grow a nice, good organic garden and you eat the food from that garden, because you'll get your fulvic acid that way.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And so you can buy our garden products and grow your own garden. You don't need to buy the supplement. But if you can't do that, you better buy our fulvic acid, which is called Wu Jin San, which means golden medicine in Chinese. It's
Cool.
an ancient Chinese medicine. And it's the same as our full humic or our full power, right? Except it's fermented, it's aged longer, it's tested, it's FDA approved, it's produced, it's bottled and approved FDA, you know, GMT, whatever they call it. We used to do it ourselves until the FDA threatened us. So these supplements have to be, taken care of by the FDA approval.
Regulate.
Yes.
Yes. Much regulated.
Mhm.
And you're looking for the bottle.
Yeah, I was looking for somebody I thought was knocking at my door, but no.
Oh,
No.
okay.
No.
Well, we're about to wrap up here, Bob. Anyway,
Yeah.
We only got a couple of minutes left. I really appreciate you coming on today and taking the time to share your adventure, because that's really what it was. And I didn't want to interrupt you too much. I think it's really important.
I get carried away, you know.
No, it's fine. And again, like the whole goal is for people to understand the journey, and what you went through is a perfect example of, hey, if you're really going to do this, it's a lifetime. This isn't something you're just going to uncover or read a quick book and be an expert at. It's a morph or a morphology, an evolution. So, again, I appreciate that. And I love the anecdotal stories and the, connections between components, like the acids. Like we know that like the silic acid is so important in plant health, but again, we didn't understand why or how it changed the pathways that allowed certain functions to either fold the protein or not fold the protein, convert it into an enzyme or leave it as a protein. So there's a lot to it, and I know the audience is going to have a chance to really unwind this. Like they'll probably listen to it a couple of 3 times before they really get the entire thing that you just basically gave us.
Yeah, that's what everybody says. Like my thing in Canada, and it was just, wow, you went through that so fast. There's so much information there. It's really hard. So then I put it up on my YouTube channel because, and then that college professor, he said, you went pretty fast on that. It's pretty hard for everybody to like absorb all that. He said, but there was a lot of genius in this. Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Genius and experience, my friend. Genius and
Yeah,
experience.
it's just a common sense kind of a thing in a way if you get deeply into it, like I did. And but again, I mean, it circle right back to Stone Age.
Yeah.
As an agroecology, I mean, I studied, how they farmed for thousands of years. How did they do it? How are they successful? They didn't know any of this.
No. Well,
So again, we circle right back around.
They didn't have to, Bob, because no one had fucked
We
them
don't
over.
have to now. We don't have to now.
Well, unfortunately, that's not altogether true. We need money.
Not altogether true. I mean, if I was a dictator and I was a guru and everybody believed me, then they wouldn't have to know it. They just do what I say.
There you go.
It'll work. But and that's kind of how it was too, in a way. It wasn't like these farmers would absorb what I'm saying. It's just that they would, trust me, And the early adapters, or the ones that are a little braver, would take my advice, and then the neighbors would see it and, I'm going to do that too. I think that's how it came with the full power in the cannabis world. And I said, yeah, I know cannabis people are going to pay more attention. That's right.
Well, speaking of that, I'm going to throw one more question out here. Does cannabis need fungal dominated soil, or cannabis doesn't need fungal dominated soil? Is that right?
No, that's not right. No.
Okay.
Cannabis or hemp, whatever, is a humus loving plant. It's a salt hating plant.
Okay.
It grows in natural stands without anybody helping it. In northern India, or lots of places in the world, it's just out there. Nobody planted it. They go out and harvest it. They feed it to their pigs. Yeah. But no, it maintains its stand for hundreds of years all by itself with the help of fungus.
Okay.
So if it was bacterial dominant, that shit's not going to grow. Okay. It's going to be hard. You get some maybe in the ditch. That's why they call it ditchweed, because in the ditch, there's more going on. It's they haven't messed it up as much. It's like ditchweed, right? Yeah, because they didn't mess up the ditch. The ground is still back to fungal dominant. Yeah. So you want to go, and I'll show you the hemp. I mean, I grew. Whoa, boy, did I ever do a big hemp experiment here in Oregon? With 30 acres, 12 varieties of hemp, and we tested different humics and fulvics, different application rates, full season, part season, and we could make those hemp plants read and write. In other words, we could either increase the THC or reduce the THC. We could increase the CBD. We could reduce all that. We could prevent them from having their crop destroyed because they had too high of a THC. We could control it up and down, and just by how we applied and when we applied, things like that. And then the results, again, we were doing everything right. And I got pictures of this, and I did a paper on it, did everything right. The guy behind it he ended up going bankrupt, but he did everything right. And it was beautiful crop. I mean, we used humates, and we just turned that soil into turned it around from bacterial dominant to fungal dominant. It was fantastic results. And he spent a fortune, getting there. And so I can tell you from real experience, not what I think. Yeah. I mean, to me,
was there a paper on that, Bob?
Yeah, there is. It's I think it's on ResearchGate or on my YouTube channel. I'm not sure which, or maybe both.
Okay.
Maybe there's a link from ResearchGate has like tons of research on humic substances on every subject in science. If you get a subscription to ResearchGate, and a lot of my papers are there.
Cool.
But yeah, so again, let's circle back to Stone Age on hemp and cannabis, right? Because it goes back. It's one of the first crops ever cultivated by man. Okay, so what does it take to grow good hemp, good cannabis? The same thing as it takes to grow good wheat. No more. Same
or any
kind
other
of,
plant.
same. If you can grow, like I tell a guy, that, well, I want to grow hemp. Okay, if you can grow corn, you can grow hemp. Oh, does ground grow good corn? Yeah, I'll grow good hemp.
Yep.
Yeah, my ancestors were brought over from the Rhineland by William Penn in 1733 because they were hemp growers in a place called Langenselbold, which means long sailboat. It's where they built sailboats on the Rhine River. And my ancestors were the guys that made the canvas and that grew the hemp.
Sales.
They grew the hemp, right?
Yeah.
And so they brought them over to Pennsylvania to grow hemp for the U.S. Navy Yard in Philadelphia back in the early days. And then my ancestors fought in the Revolution as well. But they brought them over specifically to grow hemp. So again, there's nothing new there. It's like, again, they grow good corn, you grow good hemp. And what kind of fertilizer? Same as wheat. Simple as that. Except cannabis, you can control what it's doing by how you apply biostimulants like humic substances. You want high TH or do you want low THC? Or do you want a higher CBD and you don't want THC? Well, there's a way of manipulating that.
Yeah.
You know, because I got people that want, well, here in Oregon, they want high THC primarily.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we know how to do that. And, but we also know how to keep it low so the hemp guys can do their hemp, which
is so Bob, is that information available through BioAg? If I had a person that was interested in learning how to steer it away from THC?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know whether it's available from BioAg, but it's available on my YouTube channel or my I think the ResearchGate, I think it's on there, or it may be just a link over to my YouTube.
So what is your YouTube channel? Is it BioAg or is it
No. It's at symbol at Dr. Faust, DrFaust hyphen BioAg.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not the straight BioAg link. It's Dr. Faust on BioAg. Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
At Dr. Faust hyphen BioAg.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the other one, the ResearchGate, is I don't know. I mean, that is not that easy to get a subscription to that, but
no, but
because you have to be a published author, which I am, so that's why. But I don't know. I have to check into that. But I'm pretty sure it's on my. If it isn't on my YouTube channel, I can certainly make sure it is. I can put it up there. There's nothing secret. It's a published paper.
Thank you, and that would be appreciated. If you have that we can absorb that information at a slower pace than what you gave us today, Bob, because you an amazing guest, my friend, and I really appreciate your coming on the network and sharing.
Yeah, the thing on the hemp and all that, and it's really nice. There's a lot of really nice pictures on that paper. Cool. Really nice, including drone footage and everything.
Right on.
Charts.
So, Bob, we're going to end it there. If you want to stick around, I'm just going to end the broadcast and we can talk afterwards. But, guys, just to let you know, I'm on with Grow Big TV tomorrow night at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 Eastern. And then, of course, Andy Lopez and myself again on Wednesday. But, Bob, thank you so much. And as I said, if you want to stick around, just I'm going to hit the button, guys, and we're going to end the stream.
Yeah. That sounds
Thanks,
good.
Bob. Thanks, Ken.